Hello and welcome to this episode. In the last four or so episodes, we have been examining the myth of the promise of the promised land, how the Israelites believed that the land of Canaan, the land of Palestine, and surrounding areas were given to them as inheritance by their God, Yahweh, and how they conquered the land, evicted the population that was there, and took it over. And how the Bible says they offended Yahweh by not living according to his decrees and according to the covenant they entered into with him. And they were evicted from the land and dispersed to different places. And how they believe that they have a right to return to that land. And many say that the creation of the state of Israel was their return, and in fulfillment of that, the government of Israel, or the governments of Israel and the parliament, had enacted and implemented legislations for the return of the exiles and return of people from all over the world into the land of Canaan. Today, we're going to examine the conditions given in the Jewish Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, for the so-called return, and see whether those conditions have been fulfilled. Have the conditions for return to the promised land, quote and unquote, been fulfilled, and is the state of Israel as created in 1948 a fulfillment of the promise of return? Now let's first look at the promise, or the so-called promise of return to the promised land. You will find this in Deuteronomy 30, verses 3 to verse 5. Well, I'll cut it at that point. Deuteronomy 30, 3 to 5. Now, this is often called the ingathering of the exiles. And I will read from the Bible. Then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he scattered you. Even if you've been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, from there the Lord your God will gather you and bring you back. He will bring you to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will take possession of it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. End of quote. So, this passage says, after these people have offended their God expelled them from the land they promised to them, that eventually, sometime in the future, they would be brought back, and they would prosper more and be more numerous than they were before their expulsion. However, this return, so called, is conditional. It is not automatic. and it is not absolute. It is predicated or conditional on the people of Israel returning wholeheartedly, fully, completely to the laws and covenant of Yahweh. If they do not return to these laws, these covenants, and become faithful, obedient to Him, then the right of return does not exist. Deuteronomy 30, 1 to 5. Deuteronomy 30, 1 to 5. This preceded the one I read before, the statement about return. It says, I think it's 1 to 2. When all these blessings and curses I have set before you come on you, and you come on you, and you take them to heart. Let me start it again. When all these blessings and curses I have set before you come on you, and you take them to heart, wherever the Lord your God disperses you among the nations, and when you and your children return to the Lord your God and obey Him with all your heart, with all your soul, according to everything I command you today. Then it goes to 3. Your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where He scattered you. He will bring you back to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will take possession of it. Unequivocally, any right to return is conditional on unconditional, wholehearted, complete, absolute return to the laws and covenants and edicts and rules of Yahweh. In addition, this return will not take place according to the Hebrew Bible, according to the Bible, until the Messiah or the anointed one of Israel comes. It was the anointed one that would usher the return, that would make it possible. It was the anointed one that is to restore the nation and land of Israel according to the Bible. Now this is prophesied, especially in Isaiah and other places in the Bible, but the Jewish Encyclopedia brings together these prophecies in Isaiah and sums it up like this. So I'm going to read what the Jewish Encyclopedia says about the Anointed One. The ideal king to whom Isaiah looks forward will be a scion of the stock of Jesse, on whom would rest the Spirit of God as a spirit of wisdom, valor, and religion, and who will rule in the fear of God, his loins girt with righteousness and faithfulness. That's Isaiah 11, 1 to 3, and verse 5. So this anointed one will be from the lineage of David, because it was King David, according to the Bible, that the God of Israel promised that his kingdom, will be restored, will not be lost. So this anointed one will come as a descendant of David. He will not engage in war or in the conquest of nations. The paraphernalia of war will be destroyed. That's in Isaiah 9, verse 4. His sole concern will be to establish justice among his people. The fruit of his righteous government will be peace. Righteous government, the fruit of it will be peace and order throughout the land. The lamb will not dread the wolf, nor will the leopard harm the kid. That's Isaiah 11, verse 8. That is, as the following verse explains, tyranny and violence will no longer be practiced on God's holy mountain, for the land will be full of the knowledge of God, as the water covers the sea. Look also at Isaiah 32, 1 to 2, and verse 16. The people will not aspire to political greatness, but will lead a pastoral life. Isaiah 32, verse 18 and verse 20. Under such ideal conditions, the country cannot but prosper, nor need it fear attack from outside nations. The newly risen Zion of Jesse will stand forth as a beacon to other nations, and they will come to him for guidance and arbitration. That's Isaiah 11, verse 10. He will, this anointed king or Messiah of the Israelites, he will rightly be called Wonderful Counselor, Godlike Hero, Constant Father, Prince of Peace. That's Isaiah 9, verse 5. So this is the anointed one, or the Messiah, the Jewish people are looking for. And until he comes, there is no return to the promised land, according to the Bible. Let's look at another Jewish submission on this. What is the Jewish belief about the Messiah? This is the Jewish website, chabad.org. And I quote, one of the 13 principles of Jewish faith. So this is a key principle of their faith, as enumerated by Maimonides, one of the foremost Jewish rabbis and philosophers. One of the principles, the 13 principles of Jewish faith, is that one day there will arise a dynamic Jewish leader, a direct descendant of the Davidic dynasty, who will rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and gather Jews from all over the world and bring them back to the land of Israel. All the nations of the world will recognize this Messiah to be a world leader and will accept his dominion. In the Messianic era, there will be world peace. No more wars, no farming, and in general, a high standard of living. All mankind will worship one God and live a more spiritual and moral life. The Jewish nation will be preoccupied with learning Torah and fathoming its secrets. End of quote. So that's the picture. So this Messiah, the anointed one, this leader of Israel that will lead the people back to the promised land, rebuild the temple, and establish Jewish dominion, not just in Palestine, but all over the place, will be a ruler of righteousness. He will not wage war. He will not attack anybody. He will bring love. He will bring peace. He will bring justice. He will bring righteousness. And the standard of people in Palestine, all over the area and beyond, would improve dramatically. So it will be a return to paradise. That is the belief of the Jews on return to the promised land. Okay, so has that Messiah or anointed one come? If he or she hasn't come, or should be a he, because it's a patriarchy and he was supposed to be a king in the order of David. If he has not come, then the whole notion of return to the promised land is a non-starter. Okay, this Messiah, I know the Christians claim that Jesus was the anointed one, but that is not what the Jews believe. He's not the Messiah the Jews are waiting for. The Jews are still expecting the Messiah. He has not come. But that's a different topic for a different day. We are dealing with Jewish belief. Jesus is a Messiah for Christians, not a Messiah for Jews. Now, most Jewish people, the Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox, committed, traditional, fundamental Jewish people do not accept the state of Israel. They renounce Zionism, which led the struggle for the creation of Israel. And they denounce the state of Israel. And they say the existence of this state of Israel is contrary to the will of their God, contrary to the word, the Torah of their God. Now let's go and hear from their own mouths. myjewishlearning.com. It's a very important Jewish website on matters of Judaism and Jewish beliefs. myjewishlearning.com, and I quote, the anti-Zionist worldview of the ultra-Orthodox groups of Judaism perceives Zionism and the establishment of Israel as anti-Messianic, an anti-Messianic act conceived and born in sin. They insist that the creation of Israel is a sin and against the belief in the coming of a Messiah. These groups vigorously deny the very legitimacy of the collective political return to the Holy Land and to Jewish sovereignty. These are Jewish people themselves. The attempt to hasten the end, to return by physical power to the sphere of political and military history, is a collective revolt against the kingdom of heaven. An aggressive aspiration to overstep human boundaries into the realm reserved for God, just like the deeds of the generation of the Tower of Babel. This is an act of the devil, a demonic outburst of unclean forces that may not be corrected. It is ultimately doomed to failure, regardless of human deeds. There you have it. This is the core belief of Orthodox, traditional Jewish religion. They say the Israel that was created in Palestine in 1948 was the act of the devil, an act of rebellion, an act against the will of God, an act that is wicked, that is demonic, and an act that was destined to failure, since it was not an act of God. They said it was not legitimate. Okay, so there it is. Conclusions we can draw from this exposition is that if we accept the claim that the land of Palestine and neighboring lands belong to Jewish people, belong to Israelites, because of promise or covenant they made with their God, Yahweh, and if they base the legitimacy of their claim on the land on that promise and covenant, then we have to take the entire covenant and the entire context also into account. Because just as the Bible says that they were expelled from the land because of disobedience, rebellion, and failure to commit to the will of their God and keep his covenant. Unless they return to that God, return to his ways, return to the covenant, and submit entirely to his decrees and will, then they cannot return. Now, Jewish Israelites today, most of the people in Israel today are not even Jew, are not even religious. They are not even proper practitioners of Judaism. Most are secular in outlook. The Zionists are mostly secular. The government officials are mostly secular. They do not in any way live according to the decrees and covenant of Yahweh, under which they claim the land. Second, conclusion is that it wasn't the God of Israel or Yahweh which created Israel of today, and therefore it cannot be the return envisaged by that God of theirs. This nation of Israel was created by human beings acting through the United Nations of that time. And it was done not on the back of peace and righteousness and equity and joy, but at the back of violence, terrorism, slaughter, exploitation, and expropriation of other people. And for that reason, of course, proper practitioners, faithful Jews, do not accept that state as being theirs. They call it an act of rebellion, an act of the devil, and an act of demons. The third conclusion we can draw is that those who govern Israel, their rulers, do not in any way reflect the ideals of the Anointed One as painted in the prophecy or the prophecies we have seen of Isaiah, that the Anointed One will be a man of love, a man of peace, a man of justice, a man of faith, a man of righteousness, who will abolish wars. And in his land, people will prosper and be happy. And war and famine and suffering and hunger will be a thing of the past. You are witness to the fact that the people that govern Israel since 1948 have been anything but the picture of the Anointed One painted in the Bible. Next, the people entitled to any return to the Promised Land are people who have ancestral links to David, to Jacob, people of Israel by lineage, not people who convert to Judaism from all over the world, who now enjoy the right of return. Finally, devout Jews, those who actually carry out or attempt to live according to the Torah, according to the Hebrew Bible, are still waiting for the Messiah. And until the Messiah comes and the temple is rebuilt in Jerusalem, any return to the Promised Land, so-called, will have no basis in Jewish scriptures. On the contrary, it's an act of rebellion, an act of sin, an act of the devil, an act of demons, an act of unrighteousness. That's according to Jewish religious beliefs.